we are losing out our best talent to our own competition. It's not about just tourism or owning our product. Now we need to look at the second tier enablers or connections or the value chain, right? What are we getting out of it? We are subsidizing corruption and these corrupt politicians and corrupt businessmen. I'm not prepared to do that. We are in a situation, they are no here. Those are all the things that comes into the picture when you're talking about tourism, about the country as well. We go to the Sri Lankan pavilion, we have a song and a dance, and we think, yeah, we have done a great job. Everything we have today as our heritage is something somebody did in the past. What have we done today to create a heritage that will be a heritage in another 30 years, 50 years, 100 years? I'm not trying to jump the gun or be too arrogant or anything, but I think what we have created is a legacy.
Hello, you're with Echelon's Turning Point, and in the studio with us today is Vickum Nawagamuwage, who is the founder and chief executive of Santani Resort and Spa. And we're talking about keeping the eye on the prize, positioning Sri Lanka in the global market for travel. Vickum Nawagamuwage, always a pleasure to have you here for a conversation. Let's start here, Vickum. Sri Lanka's tourism is rebounding very clearly. There is a great expectation for what can be achieved in 2024. How do you feel overall? Okay, so we are looking at the umbrella. We're taking an umbrella view here. How do you feel we are positioned given the likely level of interest in travel to Sri Lanka?
Thank you, Shavindra. That's a really good question because we kind of missed the boat a little bit since the pandemic because of the financial crisis we had. The world saw some crazy growth just after the pandemic, the revenge tourism and all of that. And we unfortunately missed it because right out of the pandemic, we had the financial crisis, right? So it was like a double whammy for us. And now we are in a bit of a catch-up game. So because of that, the amount of work we need to do is doubled compared to our competition. Now we need to always consider whatever we do in relation to the context of competition because we are not in a bubble, right? Sri Lanka, looking Uttramata Lanka, it doesn't work, right? There's competition and we need to understand that and competition got a head start ahead of us. So now our work has to be double, unfortunately. Now the question is, are we doubling up our act? Sure. Unfortunately, no, we are regressing. Right? I'll get into the details, but one simple fact, we are expecting about 2 billion incremental revenue from tourism this year, the next year. Right?
In 2024, we are expecting $2 billion more dollars in revenue on top of the $2 billion we already have.
So total of 4 billion. We are currently doing, I think we will end up around close to 2 billion this year, but we are talking about another 2 billion incremental revenue. Now, to get 2 billion incremental revenue, the budget allocation for the industry is 7 million.
$7 million US dollars from the central government's budget.
Right? So that's like we are expecting a 285 times return. Okay? Or like 28,000% return on the investment. Now that just blocks. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So that it stems from there. Like when the direction, the leadership does not understand what it means, you can't expect the rest to follow. And that's the issue of this whole country. I mean, the financial crisis was an example of that. We still haven't learned it. That's the unfortunate part of it. We went through shit. Honestly, there's no other word to say it. But we haven't learned. We are still, so what we have today is more wishful thinking rather than strategy, a coherent strategy. I think President is trying to do certain things. He has a team under him on focusing on tourism. Then the minister is there, then the SLT is there. They're all doing their own thing, but we don't have a coherent strategy that kind of comes together, talking of the price, identifying that price, and what is the roadmap we need to do, what is the investments we need from that point onwards to get to the price. But what we are looking is lottery, not a prize through hard work, through strategy, through vision. We are looking for a lottery that we might win this prize. That doesn't work that way.
If you're breaking it down, you're suggesting we have two challenges in front of us. We have a lack of a strategy, and obviously, there is no backing with adequate funding to even create or implement a strategy.
Not only funding, I think it's lack of vision. Right? Funding will come because if the business case is good, funding is not an issue. That's basics in business. There's enough money in the world for good projects. The issue is lack of vision, lack of strategy, lack of understanding, and not creating or packaging our what we have in a good way, and that makes sense to the world. So that's where we need. I don't think funding is an issue. It doesn't have. We don't have to necessarily believe or depend on government funding itself. But what happened in this budget is a joke. But overall, I don't think we need to necessarily believe in or depend on government funding itself. If we can get our act together and create the right strategy for the country, for tourism, then the funding will come naturally. There's enough FDI waiting to be invested all over the world. Right? Some countries, like for example in tourism, Costa Rica is getting like 100 times more than what Sri Lanka is getting. So those are the things we need to understand, what they are doing right, what we are not doing right. Right? I mean, Saudi Arabia is investing, and they all have their own money, but the strategy, I'm involved in some of these projects in Saudi Arabia, but I've seen the strategy that they have put in together, a clear vision called Vision 2030, what they need to be in 2030. And people are investing. So that's what we are lacking. That's what we really need to focus on.
So if we are putting together a strategy for Sri Lanka, I mean, we are looking at travel megatrends, we are looking at the various age groups of people who are traveling, who have various expectations and needs from a destination. What are the things that should matter to Sri Lanka in crafting a vision and then sort of a playbook based on that vision?
I mean, mega trends, there are few of them, and some of them has been there forever. But travel is essentially a discretionary spend, right? It's not something that, it's not like a basic human need per se, right? It's a discretionary spend. So overall around us, that discretionary spend is increasing. And that is the biggest mega trend to me, rather than wellness travel or some experiential travel or any of that.
Sure.
Right? Those are secondary. Discretionary spending is increasing. The amount of money the world has, the whole world is essentially coming into a middle class. And the amount of travelers that will come through that is just unbelievable. Right? So I don't think we need to even worry about the trends. They are there.
Right.
And Sri Lanka has such diversity in its products. I don't think there's any country in the world that has the combination of products that we have. So we are naturally positioned to capture any trend that's out there. Like, I mean, for example, like when I created wellness and Santani in Sri Lanka, what I saw is for wellness, there were three things that's needed. Like you need a kind of a medical philosophy. So we had Ayurveda for that. You need a mindfulness philosophy. We had Buddhism in Sri Lanka. And you need very serene, calm places. And we have like plenty of that. So it was a low-hanging fruit. All these things were there. You just need to capture that, identify that, and create a product out of it. So like that, for pretty much every trend that is out there, we have a product. I mean, from the beaches to the wildlife to the culture to the hills, the scenery, our smiles, our food, all that is there. We just haven't really packaged it into products. That's the issue. And there are other things that we can also create that we don't have. Like, I mean, if you take Dubai or Singapore, these countries have nothing. Right? Dubai gets about now 30 million visitors. Singapore gets about 15 million visitors. Right? What do they come for? There's no beaches, there's no wildlife, there's no hills or mountains, tea, heritage. I mean, it's gloomy places, essentially, from my point of view, just concrete jungles. How do they get there? We can do a lot of those things. So, like things like events, right? Concerts, sporting events, then shopping. Right? These are things we can easily do because our connectivity is such. We are in a better position than any of these countries, the strategic location-wise. But and we can bring, like, again, from a 250 million Indian middle class now, which is growing at a rate. They all need to do shopping somewhere that's more than India. Right? We are only focusing on casinos. Right? Yeah, casinos would be a great idea. It will thrive. But there's so much more we can do. Just getting them to shop. Like, I know, like in the 80s when Odell started, I still have people, like I had a friend from India who came recently and we were chatting, and she was saying, like, I came to Odell to shop because Odell has, at that time in the 80s, India had nothing that Odell had. So they came to Sri Lanka just to go to Odell and did their shopping. Right? I mean, we can do 1,000 times that. Now, those are the things we need to do. So for that, I think we need to really, again, strategy, change the product or the mix of hotels, the type of hotels, the price points. I can go into details later on how that we can work on.
Who should, how do you sort of separate these tasks out, these strategic tasks out? So the private sector is the likely investor in these. Are you indicating that there is a lack of a roadmap, a document that can then guide people, and that document will suggest, okay, here's the investments we're going to make in this region, go build your product there?
Exactly. That's what needed. I mean, not just the roadmap, but so there's a role that the government needs to play. The role of the government is the enabling part.
Right.
Right? It's not the investing part. It's not running around to trade shows and taking pictures and saying, oh, yeah, we went to WTM or we signed NASDAQ. That's just nonsense, right? Trivial nonsense. We have had multi-million follower influencers coming to Santani for free. Sometimes they pay and come. Right? What we need from the government is creating that strategy. And the private sector can help. I can help. Right? But the paper itself is not enough. Government needs to play the enabling role. Now, I'll go into detail. I done a little bit of analysis. I even presented it some time back when I was in the advisory committee for the minister. But again, political changes and nothing happened. Let's say now we have about, before COVID, 2 million people coming to Sri Lanka, right? And when you look at the price points that they came in, right? If you look at the Sri Lanka's number of rooms and match them with the price, there's less than 1% of our rooms that sells above $500. Okay. So it's about 120 odd rooms that we have in the whole country.
That's a low
to serve 2 million people who came before the pandemic. Right? It's like Santani, the Resplendent Group, some of the Uga properties, some of the maybe one or two of the teardrop properties. That's it. Right? Less than about 125 rooms total at above 500. So that's less than 1% of the rooms that we have. Then at let's say 200 to 350, we have still about 3%. Right? About 90% of our rooms that we have in the country are less than $150. Even from that, about 70% are less than $100. Now, that's the mix of rooms we have. Yeah? Now, if we have that same mix and we increase our arrivals through promotions, just promotions, without doing anything, right? You can promote, and Sri Lanka has enough, and we can get not $7 million. We need to spend a little bit more than that. But if we do the max we have to do and get, let's say, 10 million tourists, and 10 million tourists is nothing again when we say Singapore get 15 million and Dubai gets 30 million for just to go into malls. Right? It's nothing. It's easily doable. Then if you have to then still allocate those into that same mix. I mean, the percentages will remain the same. The rooms numbers will have to increase. Right? So if you do that, we will end up around 15 billion revenue when we have 10 million guests.
Versus the 2 billion revenue we made last year.
So obviously, when you have 10 million visitors coming, the revenue will increase, the investment needed will increase, all of that will increase. But if you actually change the mix, right? And we are not talking taking the low end out or the middle end out. We are expanding the pie. In that process, we are talking, let's say, just make it 3%. where the rooms are selling above $500,
$500 a night.
right?
Yeah.
Make the 350 average to about 10% of our mix. And you will still have about 75% of the rooms that are around 100 to 150. Right? It's a slight change.
Sure.
That will give you, with 10 million tourists, will give you $40 billion revenue.
Right. Versus the 15 billion.
The $15 billion revenue.
Sure.
Right? So now to do this, there has to be different things. Like you can't expect 10 million people to come visit the beach, or 10 million out of the 10 million, like 2 million coming doing wellness, right? Or just doing wildlife. Our capacities are not enough in Yala and Velpattu. So now where comes the enabling part, right? We need the government to really do, one of the first things we need to really do is zoning, proper zoning in the country for tourism. I mean, for other things as well, but I'll stick to zoning, right? Let's take example of Yala versus Vilpattu, or Ella versus where we are in the Dumbara Hills or the Knuckles, right? Now, Yala has gone to the dogs, essentially. From an experience point of view, there's more jeeps than leopards. And for one leopard, there's like 100 jeeps
Clamoring to
see it. And I mean, there has already been accidents and all that kind of stuff. Now, that's not someone paying $500 and above wants to experience, right? Now, obviously, there are political ramifications in Yala because there's a lot of these issues. And I understand the governments don't want to deal with that kind of situation right now, which they should, but I understand their predicament, right? So let Yala be that, but at least protect Vilpattu. Develop Vasgamu, develop something else to that level. But then in Vilpattu, you make it a high-end place. Yeah, you only allow low-density hotels, right? You only allow a certain number of jeeps per day, per zone, right? So Yala still remains as it is. It is available for everyone, for the masses, as whoever else wants to go. But then Vilpattu becomes more of a high-end product, right? So like that. I mean, Ella, again, it has become the new Hikkadua in the hills. And that's a great product. I'm not saying it's bad. But you can't have the same thing repeating everywhere else because that will screw. That the density there is so high. It's essentially at the end of the day damaging the product itself, the beauty of the place. Right? When you have that many people walking around all those places, the hills will kind of deteriorate. It's just normal. So, but then we don't want that to happen in Knuckles or somewhere else. So we can create nice zoning and introduce so many other places like the whole of East Uva is untouched, the North Central, the Northern provinces, Eastern provinces, North Central provinces. We have so many beautiful places in so many different attractions. We need to zone them accordingly. And then essentially we need to create incentive plans because everyone wants to now go to Ella. From an investment point of view as well, everyone wants to go to now Hirikitiya or Ahangam or whatever, right? Because unfortunately, our investors are such as well. They also follow the trends, which is too late. No one has still created something like what we did, unfortunately. Like we created something new. We went to a place that no one even thought. People still don't know where Hirikitiya is, but it's one of Time Magazine's 100 greatest places. So, given that, unfortunately, most people can't see that vision. We need to incentivize investors to go into these places that are not in the limelight at this point. Right? So and we create if you go to Vilpattu and create something like this, you are going to get a tax break or whatever, right? But if you go to Yala, there's no incentives, and these are simple stuff. And in the process, what we are thinking as from the government's point of view, I mean, I know they are in a tight spot. But unfortunately, even within a tight spot, when you're in a tight spot, it's the easiest time to actually create real change. But unfortunately, we are not doing it. We are just increasing taxes and killing the businesses. And investors who wants to come to Sri Lanka and invest, they are kind of throwing them away. Right? I mean, you don't need brains to increase taxes. Anyone can increase taxes. Everyone know, okay, if you increase taxes, you get more revenue. That's the easiest way out.
So if you're looking at sort of 10 million tourists and the room mix that you're suggesting, 3%.
And then allocate in different areas, different products.
Right. So do you have a sense about what sort of FDI, what sort of investment this will come to?
So at let's say 10 million tourists, We need about another 20,000 20,000 to 40,000 rooms.
We have about 45,000.
No, we total have about 75,000.
Okay.
Including
Homestays and stuff like that.
homestay stuff that is not registered at this point. Like if you look at booking.com, all the listings from Sri Lanka, it's about 75,000. What's registered at SLTD is about 42,000.
Right.
Right. So we need about another 40 to 50,000 rooms.
Right.
Right. And that will then also, if we do it in the current mix, will need a investment of about 10 billion.
10 billion US dollars.
10 billion US
Significant money.
we are sorted.
Yeah.
One industry, tourism,
Yeah.
can solve Sri Lanka's problems. Right?
Sure.
You just need to enable that.
Sri Lanka is struggling to attract $1 billion a year currently in total FDI.
Exactly. So this is a $10 billion investment. If you actually change the mix and get a little bit more higher end properties to come in, you're talking about a $15 billion investment. Right?
And this can be rolled out in 5-10 years.
We can roll out in 6 months.
Right.
The plan, I mean, it's there. I have already done the plan. Right? All the government needs is to enact it, but enable it by creating that incentive structure, creating the zoning, allowing the products. Let's say, another from a product as well. Like zoning is not necessarily a product. Let's say shopping. As you said, like the 250 million Indians are there. Right? And these guys who are wearing a Swatch would be going to let's say, not even a Rolex, something even less, right? A tag.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, we need to make the cheapest tag available in Sri Lanka. And that's just a simple duty structure adjustment. Even give an incentive to the tags to set up their mega store here. I'm just giving one example.
Yeah, sure.
So many of these things,
Exactly.
right? And we have the cheapest tags in Sri Lanka. And 250 million Indians will come to buy the tags here. And when they buy it, it's not only the tag that they will spend 3-4 days, they will eat, they will go to the casinos, they will do so many different things, they will come to Santani, right? And you create a whole ecosystem.
Sure.
But I don't know why the government or anyone has not thought of doing it in such a way, but just focusing on increasing the taxes. Simple fix. You just, one gazette, you take out the duty on these some of the luxury goods. Right? That's it. It can be ready in 6 months.
This is refreshing to have this conversation about the big picture and the potential, right? I mean, we are talking $15 billion FDI.
Exactly.
Potentially unlockable in a few years, 5 years maybe.
We can unlock create the enablement part in 6 months. Then obviously the investments will happen over the next 5-6 years. But it can happen even faster. To build a hotel, we are talking about 2 years, right? So, but if you give that vision to the investing community and the incentive structure that attracts them, they will come. In 5 years, we can hit 10 million easily.
Instead of this, obviously we don't have this on the table right now, but what the government has done is, they've readjusted the taxes in a way that sort of affects all industry, in corporate tax in a certain way. They have allocated a certain amount of money for tourism promotion, $7 million US dollars through the budget for tourism overall, right? Not just for promotions, right? And they've sort of regulated minimum room rates and all that. Do you feel we are completely missing the big picture here?
Absolutely. Completely missing the picture. Room rates, it's not the government's job. That's a function of competition and your product. If you have a good product and if you are doing better than the competition, you will get whatever the room rate you want. But if you have a bad product, what we need to do is actually eliminate those. That's what the government should be doing. Right? It just doesn't make any sense. I think the government and the ministry is kind of at lack of imagination, seriously, and doing things that are not relevant at all. And as I said, you're spending $7 million for the whole industry and expecting 28,000% return. It's just absurd. I mean, it might come because there's still tourists who wants to come to Sri Lanka, and we have the pent up growth that will kind of explode. It might happen, but that's still not strategy. It doesn't make any sense what they are talking about or doing.
So the untapped part of it is possibly so much larger than
It is. It is. So it's even more why we should spend on this industry. It can save Sri Lanka in one stroke, essentially. Some of the stuff that the government is doing, like let's say, selling some of these assets, that's something we have to do. Right? There's people struggling to live. Like, I mean, one of the key concepts of Santani is called human sustainability, which we believe, like, if we are not sustained, nothing else will work. We need to be in a good position to take care of everything else. So sadly, what is happening is the middle class is struggling, right? And that's 80% of our population. It's not a viable livelihood that we have at this point, right? It's not just about living and all these taxes. Like, I have to now figure out ways how I can keep people, my staff, right? They are not willing to pay 35% tax. Essentially, for anyone over 300,000 salary scale per month, has to pay 35% PA tax. Right? They're like, why should we do this? I can go to Middle East, I can go to Maldives, I can go anywhere.
And it's tax free.
Tax free, and I'm getting like $3,000, $4,000. Right? So it's not about just the livelihoods, the difficulty in living, but it's about competition as well. Now we are losing out our best talent to our own competition. We are giving them on a platter. Here, take our best people. This can't happen. Right? So we have to essentially divest some of these assets. We are doing the obvious ones, but we are not doing enough. Right? And it's like, I mean, the Hilton is a good example that we are doing. But Sri Lankan Airlines, we want to do it. I was with somebody, a guest of mine, who invested in Jet Airways in Sri Lanka after in India, after it got bankrupt. Like, he's one of the 3 owners now, a consortium who put the money and got it at a dime. And they're up on the deal already in 6 months. Well, it's a quoted company, and the share prices has gone up. And now they are essentially getting it back on track. I mean, it was grounded, right?
It was grounded.
It was grounded. So the first flights are apparently happening in January, and they're expecting another 200% increase in shares when the operation starts. Now, that's what investors look for. Right? Now, in Sri Lankan Airlines situation, why I'm bringing in Sri Lankan Airlines is because it's very important from a tourism point of view. That's our first point of contact for most of the tourists who come in. And there's a huge potential, again, when we are talking about 10 million tourists coming, for the airlines to grow. Right? So we need, and that's what integrated planning is. It's not about just tourism or owning our product. Now we need to look at the second tier enablers or connections or the value chain, right? But in Sri Lankan Airlines situation, I think they are looking at future cash flows and valuing it based on future cash flows. You don't value a bankrupt entity that way. No investor is going to come and assume those debts paying that kind of price. They are
So it has to be net assets.
It has to be net. It doesn't matter even net assets. Like, we have been bleeding about $150 million every year. Taxpayers' money, this 35% tax. I mean, it's okay. Like, I mean, you have these Scandinavian countries, in most developed countries, that pay 35 to 50% taxes, but you get something out of it, right? Like, but my question itself is like, why? What are we getting out of it? We are subsidizing corruption and these corrupt politicians and corrupt businessmen. I'm not prepared to do that. It's simple as that. Why should I? And it's normal. Right? So instead of bleeding $150 million that we have been doing for the last 10 years, even more, if we just give it free, we are up on the game at $150 million per year. Now that's, let's say, $1.5 billion that we could have saved, that would have prevented us from going into this hole that we are in. It's simple as that. You at least give it today. I mean, that's simple in anything. You have to stop bleeding, right? You have to cut your losses and get out of it. But we are not doing it, right? So at least, in India, India was sold at $1. And government assumed most of the debt, and they restructured the debt separately, but they gave it to
Tata's at
Tata
$1.
at $1. But the potential from there, what Tata will do, and the income that the government will get in the future is tremendous. Now we are in a situation they are now here, and I honestly have no idea what they are doing. So those are all the things that comes into the picture when you're talking about tourism, about the country as well.
Sure. So, I mean, it's really refreshing to be talking about that big picture, Vickum. Sri Lanka, in terms of putting a vision in place and a strategy to get there, and without that, your promotional campaign that you will run for this year is really insignificant in the bigger picture. About it will not untap the potential for you, but also the industry will be keen to untap as much potential now. Okay, if there's something we can do today, right, besides the vision and the strategy, are we getting that right? What are those one or two things that we can do right today? Are there fruit that's like touching the ground really?
Right now, as I said, the untapped potential is there. The revenge tourism is still happening. Sri Lanka still is refreshing because no one could come to Sri Lanka over the last 3 years.
3 years.
So that part is there, and to get that, what we need is promotion, and it doesn't have to be necessarily governments driven.
Right.
The industry has a role to play. Unfortunately, the industry is also not doing it, except for few players like us. Resplendent is doing a great job in putting Sri Lanka on the map. But other than that, one product I really need to mention is the Peko Trail that has put Sri Lanka on the map again. So few of us are doing a little bit, but everyone else in the industry is also depending on the government. It should not be the case, right? So we need to do our part as well. We need to spend a little bit on our own money and bring, let's say, these influencers, the travel agent, the travel journalists, work with the industry in that way. But the focus is on going to these mega shows like WTM or ITB. That's
Sure.
it. Our imagination stops there, right? And we go to the Sri Lankan pavilion, we have a song and a dance, and we think, yeah, we have done a great job. That's not enough. I would say yes and no on that, but from low-hanging fruits, essentially, I think one good thing, the GLitfest is happening again. That will generate a little bit of buzz that
And
we
the kind
lacked
of
in the last
tourists
kind of tourists that we want. But the thing is, again, okay, the GLitfest has been there for the last 10 years. I don't know what, 10, 15 years. I can't remember exactly the numbers. But we haven't replicated anything like that anywhere else. And it doesn't have to be literature itself. So many other things we can do. Now, few things are coming up. I think there's a Mathur Art Festival or something coming up. But that kind of things that are not the traditional way of promoting needs to happen. Right? So we have finally, I think, got into the idea of these influencers and B2C marketing. I think we pioneered that direct marketing, and it works. We are doing about 60% direct bookings, and that's beyond the gold standard anywhere. Like I would say in Sri Lanka, at least the best. I mean, at a certain standard, the best would be like 20 to 25% direct bookings.
So these are people who log into your website and just book straight.
Yes, either through the website, WhatsApp, or a call or email.
Sure.
Where we don't pay a commission.
Commission on that,
Right?
yeah.
60% of our bookings are direct. Now, I'm saving like 15% to 20% commission that would typically go to a outside Sri Lankan agency. Right? We are helping the economy indirectly. And the rest of the industry should do that. It's not just about getting an influencer or direct marketing. It has all these ripple effects that will help the economy overall. But yeah, I think B2C marketing is really, really important, that we are starting to get the hang of it. I think I'm happy and proud that I think we pioneered it in Sri Lanka. People are catching up on it, but it's not enough.
Let's talk about what you created. This brand Santani. It's a wellness resort. It's a spa. It's a brand really. Now it used to be in one location. Now it's in several locations, right? What's your strategy looking like, Vickum, given the context that you're working in?
I'm not trying to jump the gun or be too, I would say, arrogant or anything, but I think what we have created is a legacy. There's this whole talk going on right now about our heritage buildings and why we are selling this post office in New Aurelia. Unfortunately, even the former SLC chairman took a position against it. But as I said, when the people are struggling to eat and send the children to school and have a basic life, none of these buildings matter, right? So coming to Santani, what we created, like as I said, about 60% are direct bookings. Out of that, about 50% come to Sri Lanka because of Santani. They don't go anywhere else in Sri Lanka. They come to Santani, they do a package like 7 to 14 days and they go back. So 50% of our guests come to Sri Lanka because of it. Now that is creating a difference for Sri Lanka. Right? Now that's a legacy. That's what we need to be creating today as an industry. Like we are still happy, looking at Lanka, we are delusional, and we are harping on our past, right? And we are talking of all the good stuff. I mean, in this case, it's not even us; it's the British who built that building, right? And we are now trying to kind of take it as our heritage, which is just bullshit, right? I mean, so everything we have today as our heritage is something somebody did in the past. What have we done today to create a heritage that will be a heritage in another 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, right? Nothing. That should be our goal as a country, not just in tourism. I mean, I'm honestly proud, humble, whatever, that Santani has created something like that where people are coming to Sri Lanka because of it. We need to have multiple of those things because and get people to come because of this asset, because of this location, because of this product. That's what we need to do. So that's what we built, and I hope we will do more. We are also already working on doing more. We have already not developed, got into management contracts to manage a couple of properties in the south. We are already developing a new concept. I think this came up even before COVID, but because of COVID and the bombings and financial crisis, we couldn't kind of implement it. But now construction has started on Santani residences, where people can, I mean, we are essentially developing a set of residences, villas within Santani. It works in two ways. It's expanding our room inventory. So it's expansion for us because the demand is such. And also, I think I need to highlight, talking of demand, from April this year to October, which is considered the off-season where the traditionally, not traditionally, even this year I know, the industry was less than 30%
Sure.
occupancy. We did 60% occupancy in the off-season, right? And that's the strength of the product, and that's where we are now embarking on expanding. So we're adding rooms through these villas, but also it's an investment product. That's the new part of it, where let's say if you want to invest in a villa, you can buy it, and then there's a mechanism where you give it back to us, and we give you a guaranteed return by managing it and selling it as Santani room.
Oh.
And you also have some time every year to spend in your villa, but then the idea is you give it back to us, and we sell it as Santani villas to our guests, and then we do a revenue share with guaranteed returns and all of that. So that's going on as well from a Santani's point of view. What's also, I mean, again, coming back to the legacy or heritage, what we have created, we have been invited by multiple governments and private sector players overseas to replicate what we did in Sri Lanka in their countries, like Saudi Arabia, for instance. The government, the Ministry of Tourism, they are identified as a product that has done well, that has created something different. I think in one of the previous interviews we had, I talked about human sustainability in more detail and the evolutionary impact of what's going on and why the human sustainability is important. So these things have been recognized globally, and governments and private players all over the world are In early stage discussions, I would say. And in Saudi, for sure, it's gone to a little bit more than early stage. So yeah, it's exciting.
So you are taking the concept, you are taking the product of Santani. You are not necessarily looking to build infrastructure yourself or invest in infrastructure, the hotel infrastructure yourself, but you're taking an idea out of Sri Lanka. a product out of
Exactly,
Sri Lanka.
exactly. I mean that's a traditional hotel model anyway. Like we are not real estate players, right? Hotels are operators generally. Like I mean, if you take big brands like let's say Hilton's or Marriott's of the world, they only own about 10% of the hotels that they actually have.
Manage.
So the rest of it they just manage. So it's a great statement. I mean, a testament to the product and what we can do in Sri Lanka.
So it's an intellectual capital
It's
business.
essentially intellectual capital business. At the end of the day, it doesn't cost. It doesn't require much of investment. When you and that's why I said earlier as well. If you get the business plan right, the strategy right, funding will come. And this is an example, absolute perfect example of that happening. Now the funding is coming. The investors, the governments are building the resorts, and they want us to manage under our concept, under Santani brand.
This has been a fantastic chat. Anything you think you need to add to round this off?
I think I've given a lot of ideas. What I want is hopefully the government, the private sector, the industry take some of it at least. I mean, I'm not saying I know everything, but I have a product that has worked well, and I have discussed the strategies we took in developing that, and I discussed how now it's been recognized and getting out of Sri Lanka as well. So it's something that has worked. So invest in those people who has something different. I have said this somewhere before as well. You can never expect the same results by doing what you have been doing before. But Sri Lanka is doing what we have been doing before and expecting different results. That just doesn't work. If you want a different result, do something different. That's very simple. Common sense. Strategy at the end of the day is common sense. So invest, promote, enable people who are doing something different. I mean, not different for the sake of being different. It has to be obviously make sense and be strategic. But push that. Right? From an investment point of view, enabling point of view, policy point of view. That's where the government comes, the private sector comes in. Not just me, not just Santani. We need to really push that. Innovation is what we need to push. Innovation is what kind of takes us or to the next level or evolve us. Right? Because if you do the same thing, there's no evolvement. We have to evolve. And the need is such, we are already kind of maybe 15 years behind. So really, really promote innovation. Do things differently. Enable that differentiation. That's all I have to say.
Keeping the eye on the price, positioning Sri Lanka in the global market for travel. Vickum Nawagamuwage, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you very much.